All right, a few points about the cross-examination, which begins on 24b. Don't want to say too much about that, but another analogy comes in. Again, he's doing the horse thing. So Meletus, who's the main accuser of Socrates, he accuses Socrates of corrupting the minds of the youth, and then Socrates gets him to admit that he's doing this intentionally, that he believes that Socrates wants to corrupt the youth. So Socrates, claims to be very hurt by this charge. Oh, how could you, say that I am corrupting people? And he says, how many other people are corrupting the youth? And Meletus says, no, it's only you. You're the only one. So Socrates says, this is strange to me. So in 25a, he says, then it would seem that the whole population of Athens has a refining that is a good effect upon the young except myself, and I alone corrupt them? Is that your meaning? Most emphatically yes, says Meletus. A great misfortune indeed you've damned me for. Well, let me put another question to you, and here comes the analogy. Take the case of horses. Do you believe that those who improve them make up the whole of mankind, and that there's only one person who has a bad effect on them? Or is the truth just the opposite, that the ability to improve them belongs to one person or very few, who are horse trainers, whereas most people, if they have to do with horses and make use of them, do them harm? And he gets Meletus to agree. No, not everyone is good at horse training. Only a few experts are good at horse training. So Socrates says, this is very curious. We have experts in horse training, and this, of course, we have experts in cooking and experts in making shoes and designing togas, and right, most people are no good at these things. We only have experts. But you're saying, in the case of training the young, everyone in the city is an expert except for me. I don't see how that can be the case. I don't see how, with respect to one of the most profound and pressing questions, how to educate our youth, everyone can be an expert, when not everyone can be an expert at training horses. It's ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about, Meletus. You're not being serious. So another case where he uses analogy to make his point. The other thing that he uses, I don't want to go into this in any great detail, but he uses what we would today call logic, which is to say, we see this all the time in our court system, law and order and things like this. But he gets his accuser, in this case Meletus, to agree to a certain point, and then slowly but surely says, well, if that's true, then shouldn't this be true? Must not this also? Well, yeah, that would be true, yeah. And if this is true, wouldn't that be true? And he takes him through a series of if-then, which he really can't deny, which are logically clear, and then comes to a conclusion which Meletus can't accept. So his appeal to the reader, as you're going through this, I think Plato's appeal to the reader and Socrates' appeal to his accusers is to ask yourself, when I reason about these things, when I draw conclusions, when I accuse people, whatever it is, am I confident, and can I be confident that I'm actually using logic and good reasoning? Or if someone like Socrates really were to question me carefully and make me slow down and think through things, would I fall apart? Would I realize that I have not based my decisions on logic and reason, but in fact have allowed myself to be persuaded by opinions, by appearances, by feelings, etc.? So analogy and logic, two of the powerful weapons, you might say, in Socrates' arsenal. All right, let's move ahead. Different kinds of points. 28b, he is again kind of anticipating the jury's thinking in this case, and he says, perhaps someone will say, do you not feel compunction, Socrates, at having pursued an activity which puts you in danger of penalty? So, aren't you a bit apologetic? Because clearly whatever you've done, good or bad, still has brought you to this point of death. I might fairly reply to that person, says Socrates, you are mistaken, my friend. If you think that a man who is worth anything ought to spend his time weighing up the prospects of life and death, he has only one thing to consider in performing any action. That is, whether he is acting justly or unjustly, like a good man or a bad one. And then he compares himself to the great heroes of the Odyssey and the Iliad who faced death in battle and are viewed as heroes, and they showed loyalty and love and duty in the face of death, and we call them heroes. And he's saying, I'm no different. I'm showing loyalty not now to those who I fight with, but to truth, to justice, to these ideals. And it would be silly, just as it would be silly for a soldier who is expected to be heroic in the face of death to say, oh, well, I never knew it was going to come to this. If I knew that it was going to come to this, to death, I wouldn't have ever signed up to be a soldier. Well, all of us know eventually death is coming. So now that I'm facing death, that shouldn't alter, and it doesn't alter, how I look at my life. My life should be judged according to right and wrong, justice or injustice, and not according to whether I'm about to die. And then he makes the argument, which I think we mentioned in class the other day, but I'll just remind you, 29a. Another way of looking at this is to say, and if I were using death, if I were weighing life and death in this, so if I tell the jury that I'm sorry and I beg for my life, what will happen? And if I don't and I'm put to death, what will happen? Well, I don't know what will happen if I'm put to death. I don't claim to know what will happen. So for me to weigh it up, for me to assume that I can calculate and judge the effects of my decisions here in front of the jury would be arrogant. I don't know. So this is what I've spent my life arguing, and I won't do any different now. Then I think the last main point I want to make before we wrap up is on 29 and 30. He says, Gentlemen, I'm your very grateful and devoted servant, but I owe a greater obedience to God than to you. So long as I draw breath and have my faculties, I shall never stop practicing philosophy and exhorting you and indicating the truth for everyone that I meet. I shall go on saying in my usual way, my very good friend, you are an Athenian and belong to a city which is the greatest and most famous in the world for its wisdom and strength. Notice the separation there. We had the strong and the weak arguments before, and he's distinguishing wisdom and strength here. They're two different things. Are you not ashamed, he says to the jury, that you give your attention to acquiring as much money as possible, and similarly with reputation and honor, money, reputation, and honor, and give no attention or thought to truth and understanding and the perfection of your soul? And if any of you disputes this and professes to care about these things, I shall not at once let him go or leave him. No, I shall question him and examine him and put him to the test. And if it appears that in spite of his profession he has made no real progress towards goodness, I shall reprove him for neglecting what is of supreme importance. What did he say was of supreme importance? Truth and understanding and the perfection of the self. I shall do this to everyone I meet, young or old, foreigner or citizen, but especially to you, my fellow citizens, inasmuch as you are closer to me in kinship. This I do assure you is what my God commands, and it is my belief that listen to this, no greater good has ever befallen you in this city than my service to the God. For I spend all my time going about trying to persuade you, young and old, to make your first and highest concern not for your bodies, not for your possessions, but for the highest welfare of your souls, proclaiming as I go, wealth does not bring goodness, goodness brings wealth and every other blessing, both to the individual and the state. Now if I corrupt anyone, the young or anyone, by this message, the message would seem to be harmful, but if anyone says that my message is harmful or is different from this, he's talking nonsense. So, the idea here, of course, is that things have different values. Some things are worth pursuing, some things are not. Some things are of a greater value than other things. And we as human beings should always, no matter who we are, we should spend our time caring about the things that have greater value. That seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? In any endeavor, whatever we do, let's go to money, right? Something is worth $100, something was worth $20, and you spend all your time going after the thing worth $20? Kind of stupid. He thinks your body is important for you to care for, but not as important as your soul. Just as your eyes are important to care for, but not as important as your mind. Your eyes can see, but only a limited range of things. Your mind can see more. Your mind can penetrate more into the meaning and the causes of what you see. So why do we spend all of our time on superficial beauty when there's a deeper beauty captured by the mind, etc.? So one of the final points I'd want to make, and this is one of the enduring legacies of Socrates, I believe. The more you read of Socrates, the more you'll disagree with the specific arguments he makes, the specific points he makes. But notice, one of his methods, in fact, you might say this at the center of his method, is logic, right? Trying to think clearly, not leaving anything out, reasoning carefully. Well, you'll notice this if you begin to disagree and argue with the text. As soon as you begin to disagree and argue with the text, what you're saying to the text is, that's not very logical. It doesn't make sense. I can think of an objection, right? I can think of a counter claim. I can think of something that you've left out. Well, what's happening there? You're playing Socrates' game, aren't you? You're saying, yeah, I actually think you should be logical, Socrates, and I think I should be too, so let's try to use logic to make sense of this, and I think you're wrong, but I'll show you that you're not being logical. I'll show you through reasoning. I'll show you through the kinds of arguments you give that you're wrong, and Socrates would say, thank you very much. Right? Thank you very much for showing me rationally, logically, that there's a better way to understand this. That's all I'm asking. So the more you fight with Socrates, the more you become Socrates. The more you begin to see his point, that if some things are more valuable than others, let's care about those. And if there's a difference between truth and opinion, let's search for the truth. If there's a distinction between appearance, physical appearance and also intellectual, mental appearance, right? Shadows as opposed to light, real things as opposed to copies or images of things. If there are differences like that in the world, well then why the hell are we looking at shadows, right? Why do we care about appearances? Why do we care about reputation? Those are real, but they're just poor copies of something better, something higher. So let's devote ourselves as human beings to logically, rationally, intellectually, through language and debate and discussion, pursuing the question of what is highest and best. It's hard to argue with Socrates without playing his game. Alright, so this has been a bit of a lengthy introduction, but I hope it helps you to get some of the basic ideas out. I hope you are intrigued by this connection to the cave that we found in the text, and that you keep this image of the cave and all of these questions of appearance versus reality, opinion versus truth, keep them floating around in your head. You'll find them to be very productive in lots of the things that we do in class. Until next time, see ya.